Henry Kissinger, America's greatest diplomat. This is a quiet night, my dear. The moon hangs low in the sky, like a soft lantern shining through the window, casting warm, silvery light across your bed, over your hands, and onto the wall where a shadow of a tree branch sways gently in the night breeze. The world outside has sunk into a gentle silence. No loud noises from cars rushing down the street, no hurried footsteps of people rushing to their next task, no harsh voices breaking the calm. There is only the soft rustle of leaves outside your window, the distant hoot of an owl calling into the darkness, and the steady, reassuring rhythm of your own breath, in and out, slow and calm. Tonight, we will tell a story of a man who walked gently but boldly through the world, a man who carried the weight of his past yet never let it harden his heart, a man who used words instead of weapons, and wisdom instead of wrath to shape the history of nations. His name is Henry Kissinger, and he is remembered as one of the greatest diplomats in American history. But more than that, he was a man of contradictions, a refugee who became a powerful leader, a man who knew profound fear yet chose courage, a realist who never lost his capacity for hope. Close your eyes, my beloved, let your body relax, let your shoulders drop, let your hands rest softly at your sides, let your legs go limp, and let us travel back in time, to a world that needed his courage and his heart, a world that was changed forever, because of the choices he made. I am right here with you, my sweet, every step of the way. Close your eyes, my dear, and let us go back. Back to 1923, to a small city called Fürth in Germany, a place where cobblestone streets wound past red-roofed houses with wooden shutters that creaked in the wind, where flower boxes filled with red geraniums and white daisies hung from windowsills, adding a splash of color to the quiet streets. The air in Fürth smelled of fresh bread baking in the morning, warm, yeasty, and sweet, wafting from the small bakeries that lined the main square. In the evening, the air carried the scent of wood smoke from the fireplaces in each home, a cozy, familiar smell that wrapped around the city like a blanket. The sounds of Fürth were soft and comforting, children laughing as they chased each other through the streets after school, their voices high and bright, horses clopping along the cobblestones, their hooves hitting the stones with a steady, rhythmic tap-tap-tap, church bells ringing at dusk, their deep, melodic chimes echoing through the city, telling people it was time to return home to their families. The people of Fürth wore long, heavy coats and woolen hats to keep out the cool German air, and the buildings stood tall and sturdy, made of red brick and stone, built by hands that had worked the land and the crafts for generations. Carpenters, bakers, blacksmiths, tailors, each contributing to the quiet, hard-working life of the city. This is where Henry Kissinger was born, on May 27, 1923, a little boy with bright, curious eyes and soft brown hair, born into a Jewish family that loved him deeply. His parents, Louis and Paula Kissinger, were kind, hard-working people. His father was a teacher of Hebrew and history, a man who loved books and loved sharing his knowledge with others, and his mother was a warm, gentle woman who took care of their home and their two sons, Henry and his younger brother, Walter. From the very beginning, Henry was a curious child, yes, but he was also sensitive, a boy who noticed the way his father's eyes softened when he told stories of peace, who felt the warmth of his mother's hug as a shield against the world. He would sit on his father's lap for hours, listening to tales of kings and queens, of wars and peace, of people who had changed the world with their words and their actions. But even then, he would furrow his brow, asking, "Why do people fight, Father? Why can't they just talk?" Those questions would stay with him for the rest of his life, planting a seed in his heart that would one day grow into a passion for diplomacy and peace, a passion rooted not just in curiosity, but in a quiet, unshakable belief that kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. I remember, my dear, the world was not kind to little Henry and his family. For the first few years of his life, things were calm. Henry went to a small Jewish school, made friends with the other children, played in the streets of Firth, and learned from his father's stories. But when he was 7 years old, in 1930, dark clouds began to gather over Germany. A group called the Nazis, led by Adolf Hitler, began to rise to power, and their message was one of hate and division. They hated Jewish people like Henry, his parents, his brother, and his relatives, and they spread lies about them, saying that Jewish people were to blame for all of Germany's problems. Slowly but surely, the Nazis began to make cruel rules that made life impossible for Jewish families. Jewish children could not go to the same schools as other children. They were forced to attend separate, overcrowded schools where they were treated poorly by their teachers and peers. Jewish families could not own businesses. Many of the small shops and stores that had been run by Jewish families for generations were taken away, their owners left with nothing. Jewish people were not allowed to sit on park benches, to eat in certain restaurants, to go to the movies, or to walk on certain streets. And worst of all, they were often hurt by angry mobs of Nazi supporters, young men in brown shirts who would shout cruel words, throw stones, and even attack Jewish people in the streets. Little Henry and his friends were chased and beaten by these young men, their clothes torn, their bodies bruised, their hearts filled with fear. But Henry was not just scared. He was angry, too. Angry that his family was suffering, angry that his friends were hurt, angry that the world could be so cruel. His father lost his job as a teacher because he was Jewish, and the family struggled to make ends meet, relying on the kindness of relatives and friends to put food on the table. Henry would come home from school every day, scared and sad and angry, and his mother would hold him close, rocking him gently, and whisper, "It will get better, my child. We will get through this together." But as the years went on, things only got worse, and Henry learned a hard lesson. Fear could either break you, or it could fuel you. He chose to let it fuel him, to promise himself that if he ever had the power, he would never let anyone suffer the way his family was suffering. Imagine, my sweet, what it was like for a little boy to be afraid to go outside, to look over his shoulder every time he walked down the street, to see his family hurting and struggling, to know that his relatives were disappearing, taken away by the Nazis to dark, terrible places where they would never be seen again. Henry's family lost 13 members to the Nazis' cruelty: uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents, each one taken away, never to return. Every night, Henry would lie in bed, listening to his parents whisper in the next room, their voices filled with sorrow and fear. He would hug his brother Walter tightly, afraid that they would be taken away too. But his mother would always come in, tuck them in, and kiss their foreheads, saying, "We will be safe, my child. We will find a new home, a place where we can be free, a place where no one will hurt us." That whisper became a promise, a light in the darkness, a reason to keep going even when things seemed hopeless. And in 1938, when Henry was 15 years old, that promise came true. His family fled Germany, leaving behind everything they knew, their home, their friends, their belongings, and traveled through London to a new land, a land of hope and freedom, America. The journey was long and scary, filled with uncertainty. They traveled by train to Berlin, then by boat to London, where they stayed for a short time before boarding another boat to New York City. The boat ride was rough, the sea choppy, and Henry spent many days feeling seasick, staring out at the endless ocean, wondering what his new life would be like. But through it all, his family stayed together, holding on to each other, holding on to the hope of a better future. And Henry, ever the observer, ever the thinker, would sit on the deck, watching the waves, and make a silent vow. He would honor the sacrifice his family had made. He would learn everything he could. He would become someone who could protect others, who could prevent the kind of horror he had witnessed from ever happening again. He was still a scared boy, but he was a boy with a purpose that would guide him for the rest of his life. When they arrived in New York City, the world felt strange and new, like a dream that was hard to believe. The streets were busier than anything Henry had ever seen. Cars honking, people rushing, tall buildings reaching up into the sky, so tall that they seemed to touch the clouds. The buildings were taller than the churches in Firth, taller than any building he had ever imagined, and they were made of steel and glass, shining in the sunlight. Everyone spoke a language he could barely understand, English, a language that sounded strange and unfamiliar to his ears. He felt lonely, my dear, and shy, like a small bird far from its nest, like a stranger in a strange land. He missed his home in Firth, missed the familiar streets, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of church bells at dusk. He missed his friends, even though he knew he would never see them again. But he was brave, and he was smart, and he knew that this was his chance to start over, to build a new life for himself and his family. He went to high school in New York City, a school where most of the students spoke English, where the classes were taught in a language he could barely follow. But he worked hard, harder than anyone else, staying after class to ask his teachers for help, studying late at night when everyone else was asleep. He would look up words in a German-English dictionary, writing them down in a notebook, practicing them over and over again until he could say them perfectly. Even though he had to work in a factory during the day to help his family, squeezing acid from brush bristles, a job that made his hands sore and his clothes smell like chemicals. Delivering packages in the hot summer sun and the cold winter snow. Doing whatever he could to earn a little money to help put food on the table. He never gave up on his studies. He got perfect grades, even though it was hard, even though he was tired, even though he felt like giving up sometimes. But what made Henry different, my dear, was not just his intelligence, it was his humility. He never bragged about his grades, never looked down on others who struggled. He would help his classmates with their homework, even when he was exhausted, because he knew what it was like to feel lost, to feel like an outsider. He knew that education was his ticket to a better life, his chance to make something of himself, his chance to honor his family's sacrifice. But he also knew that success meant nothing if he forgot to be kind. Remember, my dear, courage is not the absence of fear. It is feeling afraid and moving forward anyway. Henry was afraid of failing, afraid of being alone, afraid of never fitting in, but he never gave up. He studied at night after work, his eyes tired but his heart determined, the light of a small lamp shining on his notebook as he read and wrote and studied. He loved learning, especially history and math. History because it taught him about the past, about the mistakes people had made, about the courage of those who had fought for peace and freedom. Math because it was logical, because it made sense, because it was a language that everyone understood, no matter where they came from. He dreamed of a day when he could use his mind to make the world a better place, a day when he could help people who were suffering, a day when he could prevent the kind of cruelty he had seen in Germany from happening again. When he was 19 years old, in 1942, he joined the United States Army, leaving his family again to serve a country that had given him a new home, a country that had welcomed him when no one else would. He was sent to Europe, back to the land he had fled just a few years earlier, but this time, he was not a scared little boy. He was a young man, strong and brave, but still carrying the scars of his past. When he arrived in Europe, he was assigned to the 84th Infantry Division, and because he spoke German fluently, he was made a translator, helping American soldiers communicate with the people of Germany. It was a difficult job, my dear. He had to translate the words of soldiers who were angry and scared, the words of German civilians who were hungry and homeless, the words of prisoners of war who were confused and hopeless. But he did it with kindness and patience, never letting his own pain or fear get in the way of helping others. And in those moments, he found a sense of purpose he had never felt before. He was not just translating words. He was bridging divides, he was helping people understand each other, he was doing the very thing he had dreamed of as a little boy in Germany. In the army, Henry found his gift, a gift for understanding people, a gift for listening, a gift for finding common ground even in the most difficult of situations. He was kind, my dear, even to those who had once been his enemies. He knew that the German people were not all Nazis, that many of them were innocent, that many of them had suffered just as much as he and his family had. He did not hold their nationality against them. He saw them as human beings, people who had been caught in the crossfire of a terrible war, people who just wanted to go home, to be safe, to be with their families. When his unit took control of a city called Krefeld, a city in western Germany that had been damaged by the war, buildings in ruins, streets littered with debris, people hungry and scared, he was put in charge of restoring order. He was just 21 years old, but he had a wisdom beyond his years, a wisdom forged by pain and resilience. He walked through the streets of Krefeld, talking to the people, listening to their concerns, asking them what they needed. He did not act like a conqueror. He acted like a friend, a helper, someone who cared. He did not demand respect. He earned it, with his kindness, his fairness, his willingness to listen. In just 8 days, he helped build a civil government, getting schools and hospitals running again, arranging for food and water to be delivered to the people, helping families find their loved ones who had been separated during the war. The people of Krefeld loved him because he was fair, because he did not punish without reason, because he saw the good in everyone, even in the darkest of times. He would often be seen walking through the streets, stopping to talk to children, giving them candy, asking them how they were doing. He would listen to the elderly, who told him stories of their lives before the war, of the peace and happiness they had once known. He would help the sick and the injured, making sure they got the care they needed. In that small city, in the middle of a war-torn country, Henry showed people what kindness and compassion could do. He showed them that even in the darkest of times, there is hope. And for Henry himself, those days in Krefeld were a reminder that no matter how much pain he had endured, no matter how much anger he had felt, kindness was still his greatest strength. Let me tell you a little story, my dear, a story within our story, about a young girl named Anna, who lived in Krefeld during the war. Anna was 10 years old, with curly brown hair and big blue eyes, and she lived with her parents in a small apartment in the center of the city. Her father was a carpenter, a kind man who loved to build things, tables, chairs, toy boxes for the neighborhood children. But when the Nazis came to power, Anna's father was taken away because he had hidden Jewish people in his basement, people who were fleeing from the Nazis' cruelty. He was taken to a concentration camp, and Anna and her mother never saw him again. After that, Anna and her mother went into hiding, moving from house to house, staying with friends and relatives who were willing to risk their lives to help them. They were scared all the time, afraid that they would be found, afraid that they would be taken away like Anna's father. When Henry and the American soldiers arrived in Krefeld, Anna was scared, hiding in the attic of a neighbor's house, curled up in a corner, covered with an old blanket, hungry and cold. She had been told that American soldiers were cruel, that they would hurt her and her mother, that they were enemies. She was so scared that she could not even cry. She just sat there, trembling, listening to the sounds of soldiers outside, waiting for the worst to happen. One day, Henry was walking through the neighborhood, checking on the people, when he heard a soft whimper coming from the attic of one of the houses. He stopped, listened, and then knocked on the door. The neighbor answered, looking nervous, but Henry smiled and said, "I mean no harm. I just heard a sound, and I wanted to make sure everyone is okay." The neighbor hesitated, then let him in, and Henry climbed the stairs to the attic. There, in the corner, he saw Anna, small, scared, alone. He knelt down beside her, his voice soft and gentle, speaking to her in German, the same language her father used to speak, the same language that felt like home to her. In that moment, Henry was not a soldier, not a translator. He was a man who remembered what it was like to be a scared child, a man who knew the pain of losing family, a man who wanted to ease her suffering. "I am not here to hurt you," he said, his eyes warm and kind, his voice steady, like a lullaby. "I am here to help you go home, to make sure you are safe, to make sure you have food to eat and a warm place to sleep." He held out his hand, and Anna hesitated for a moment, then slowly took it. His hand was warm and strong, and it made her feel safe, like she had not felt in a long time. He gave her a piece of bread, fresh and warm, and a blanket, soft and cozy, and he sat with her for a long time, listening to her talk about her father, about her fear, about how much she missed her home. He did not interrupt her. He just listened, nodding, telling her that it was okay to be scared, that her feelings were valid, that she was not alone. He told her about his own childhood, about the fear he had felt in Germany, about how his family had fled to America to be safe. For the first time in months, Anna felt seen, like someone understood her pain, like someone cared. After a while, he asked her if she knew where her mother was, and Anna told him that her mother was hiding with another family a few blocks away. Henry took her by the hand, walked with her through the streets of Krefeld, and helped her find her mother. When Anna's mother saw her, She ran to her, hugging her tightly, crying tears of joy and relief. She turned to Henry, tears in her eyes, and said, "Thank you. Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for being kind to us." Henry smiled and said, "I'm just doing what is right. No one should have to live in fear, especially a child." But inside, Henry felt something else. He felt a sense of peace, a sense that he was keeping the promise he had made to himself as a little boy in Germany. Anna never forgot that day, my dear. She grew up to be a teacher, just like Henry's father, and she told her students about the kind American soldier who had shown her that kindness could heal even the deepest wounds, that even in the middle of a war, there are good people who care. She taught her students to be kind, to be compassionate, to stand up for those who are suffering. That is the power of diplomacy, my love, not just negotiating with leaders, not just signing treaties, but caring for the ordinary people who are caught in the crossfire of history, the people whose lives are affected by the decisions of those in power. Henry understood that, and that is why he was so great. He never lost sight of the human cost of conflict, never forgot that behind every political decision, there are real people, with real hopes and real fears. After the war ended in 1945, Henry went back to America, back to New York City, where his family was waiting for him. He was 22 years old, a veteran of the war, a man who had seen the worst of humanity but had also seen the best. He had witnessed cruelty and suffering, but he had also witnessed kindness and courage, and he had learned that the latter was far more powerful. He knew that he wanted to continue helping people, that he wanted to use his knowledge and his experience to make the world a better place. So he decided to go to college, to study history and diplomacy, to learn everything he could about how nations interact, about how to bring peace to a world that had been torn apart by war. He applied to Harvard University, one of the most famous and prestigious schools in the world, and he was accepted. It was a dream come true for him, a chance to learn from the best teachers, to meet other bright, curious students, to pursue his passion for peace and diplomacy. At Harvard, Henry studied hard, harder than he had ever studied before. He spent hours in the library, reading books about history, politics, international relations, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. He wrote a thesis that was almost 400 pages long, still the longest undergraduate thesis in Harvard's history. A thesis about the history of diplomacy in Europe, about how leaders had used words and negotiations to avoid war and build peace. His thesis was so impressive that it was later published as a book, called A World Restored, and it became a classic in the field of international relations. But what made Henry's work stand out was not just its depth, it was his empathy. He did not just analyze historical events. He put himself in the shoes of the leaders who had made difficult decisions. He tried to understand their fears and their hopes, their mistakes and their triumphs. After graduating from Harvard with honors, Henry stayed on to get his master's degree and his PhD, and eventually, he became a professor at Harvard, teaching students about history and diplomacy. He was a great teacher, my dear. He was passionate, he was knowledgeable, he was kind. He would stay after class to talk to his students, to answer their questions, to encourage them to follow their dreams. He did not talk down to them. He treated them as equals, as fellow seekers of knowledge. He wrote books, too, talking about how nations should get along, about the importance of balance and peace, about the dangers of war and conflict. One of his most famous books was called Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy, where he said that war should never be about destruction, but about finding a way to coexist, about finding common ground even with those we disagree with. He argued that nuclear weapons were too dangerous to use, that they could destroy the entire world, and that the only way to keep the world safe was to talk, to negotiate, to find peace. And in all his work, he carried the weight of his past, never as a burden, but as a reminder of why his work mattered. Another little story, my dear, about a young student named David, who studied with Henry at Harvard. David was from a small town in Iowa, a town where everyone knew everyone else, where the biggest excitement was the annual county fair. He was a bright, hard-working student, but he was nervous about being in such a big, prestigious school, about being surrounded by students who had grown up in big cities, who had gone to the best schools, who seemed so much smarter and more confident than he was. He was scared to speak up in class, scared to ask questions, scared that he would look stupid in front of his teachers and his peers. One day, after a class on international relations, David stayed behind to ask Henry a question. His hands were shaking, his voice was trembling, and he could barely look Henry in the eyes. "Professor Kissinger," he said, "I don't understand something. You talk about diplomacy, about talking to people we disagree with, but what if they don't want to talk? What if they only want to fight?" Henry smiled, a warm, kind smile that made David feel at ease. He sat down next to David, patting him on the shoulder, and said, "The best questions are the ones that scare you to ask, David. Curiosity is a gift. My boy, never lose it. And to answer your question, there will always be people who don't want to talk, who only want to fight. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Diplomacy is not about giving up when things are hard. It's about keeping trying, even when it seems impossible. It's about seeing the good in people, even when they don't show it. It's about remembering that every person, no matter how different they are from us, has hopes and fears, has a family they love, has a dream for the future. If we can find that common ground, if we can talk to each other with kindness and respect, we can find peace." Henry paused, then added, quietly, "I know this because I was once that scared boy, too, scared of the world, scared of people who were different from me. But I learned that fear is a choice, just like peace is a choice. You can choose to be scared, to hate, to fight, or you can choose to be brave, to understand, to hope." David took those words to heart, my dear. He stopped being scared to ask questions. He started speaking up in class. He worked hard, and he went on to become a diplomat too, working to end conflicts in Africa, to bring peace to countries that had been torn apart by war. He always remembered Henry's kindness, how he made everyone feel seen, no matter how small or unimportant they thought they were. He remembered Henry's words about curiosity and kindness, and he lived by them every day. That is the legacy of a great teacher, someone who not only teaches knowledge, but who inspires others to be better, to do better, to make the world a better place. And that is the heart of Henry Kissinger, a man who had been scared, who had been hurt, but who chose to use his pain to lift others up. Diane 1969. A new president was elected in America, Richard Nixon. President Nixon was a man who had a vision for America, a vision of a country that was strong, a country that played a leading role in the world, a country that could bring peace to a dangerous world. He knew about Henry's wisdom, about his ability to see both sides of a problem, about his gift for diplomacy, and he asked Henry to be his national security advisor. It was a big job, an important job, one that would require Henry to travel the world, to meet with world leaders, to make decisions that would affect the lives of millions of people. But Henry was ready. He had spent decades preparing for this moment, decades studying, learning, listening, and now, he had the chance to put his beliefs into action. Soon after, in 1973, Henry became Secretary of State, the first immigrant to ever hold that important job. He was now one of the most powerful men in the world, but he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the scared little boy in Germany, hiding from the Nazis, the lonely teenager in New York, struggling to learn a new language and make a new life, the kind soldier in Europe, helping to heal the wounds of war. He never let power go to his head. He remained humble, kind, and focused on his goal, to bring peace to the world. He would often work late into the night, reading reports, meeting with advisors, preparing for meetings with world leaders. He would take time to talk to his staff, to listen to their ideas, to thank them for their hard work. He would call his family every day, checking in on them, making sure they were okay. Even in the middle of all the chaos and pressure of his job, he never lost sight of what was important: family, kindness, peace. And when the pressure got too much, when the weight of the world felt too heavy, he would retreat to his office, close the door, and read a book, often a history book, a reminder of where he had come from, of why he was doing this work. He was not a perfect leader, my dear. He made mistakes, he had doubts, he sometimes felt overwhelmed, but he never let those doubts stop him. He knew that the work of peace was never easy, but it was always worth it. The world was a dangerous place then, my dear. America was fighting a war in Vietnam, a war that had lasted for years, a war that had killed thousands of American soldiers and millions of Vietnamese people. The war was unpopular in America. People were protesting in the streets, demanding that the war end, that the soldiers come home. The United States and the Soviet Union were enemies, locked in a Cold War, a war without actual fighting, but a war of words, of threats, of nuclear weapons. Both countries had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world, and the tension between them was high, so high that it felt like a nuclear war could break out at any moment. And China, a great country across the Pacific Ocean, had been cut off from America for more than 20 years. No talks, no trade, no friendship, no communication. The two countries were enemies, and the world was divided into two sides: the United States and its allies, and the Soviet Union, China, and their allies. The world was a scary place, my dear, a place where war seemed inevitable, where peace seemed like a distant dream. But Henry refused to give up. He believed that peace was possible, that even the most dangerous conflicts could be resolved with words, not weapons. He believed that the United States could work with its enemies to find common ground, to build a safer, more peaceful world. And what made Henry unique, my dear, was his ability to see beyond labels, to see that enemies were not just faceless adversaries, but human beings with their own fears, their own hopes, their own histories. He did not hate the leaders of the Soviet Union or China. He sought to understand them, to find common ground, to build a relationship based on respect, not fear. Henry knew that the only way to peace was to talk, not to fight. He believed in something called realism, not being mean or cruel, not ignoring the harsh realities of the world, but seeing the world as it is, not as we wish it would be. He said, "A country that demands moral perfection in foreign policy will achieve neither perfection nor security." What he meant, my dear, is that sometimes you have to work with people you disagree with, people you even dislike, to keep the peace, to protect the lives of ordinary people. Sometimes you have to make compromises, to give a little to get a little, to put the greater good above your own beliefs or desires. Henry was not naive. He knew that the world was not perfect, that there were evil people in the world, that there were conflicts that could not be resolved easily. But he also knew that war was never the answer, that the cost of war was too high, too many lives lost, too many families torn apart, too much pain and suffering. He believed that diplomacy was the only way to avoid war, to build peace, to create a world where everyone could live in freedom and safety. He spent hours meeting with world leaders, listening to their concerns, explaining America's position, looking for common ground. He traveled the world constantly, from Washington, D.C. to Moscow, from Beijing to Hanoi, from Tel Aviv to Cairo, always working, always trying, always fighting for peace. And through it all, he carried the weight of his past, his memories of Germany, his memories of Krefeld, his memories of Anna and her mother, reminding himself that every negotiation, every conversation, every compromise was for the people who would be affected by the decisions he made. He was not just a diplomat, he was a guardian of peace, a protector of the vulnerable, a man who had seen the worst and chose to fight for the best. The most important moment of Henry's career came in 1971. He secretly traveled to China, a trip that no one knew about, not even most of the American government, not even President Nixon's closest advisors. It was a risky trip, a dangerous trip. China and America were enemies, and no high-ranking American official had visited China in decades. If the trip was discovered, it could cause an international crisis. It could ruin relations between the two countries even further. It could even lead to war. But Henry was willing to take that risk, because he knew that opening relations with China was the key to peace in Asia, the key to a safer world. He flew in a small, unmarked plane, flying under the radar, landing in Beijing, a city that had never been visited by a high-ranking American official in more than 20 years. The air in Beijing was cold, the sky gray, and the streets were quiet, lined with ancient buildings that had stood for hundreds of years. Pagodas, palaces, temples, each one a reminder of China's rich history and culture. Henry was nervous, my dear, but he was also excited. He knew that this trip could change the world, that it could bring peace to two great nations, that it could open the door to a new era of friendship and cooperation. He met with Chinese leaders, including Premier Zhou Enlai, a wise, kind man who also wanted peace. They talked for days, not as enemies, but as people who wanted to find common ground, who wanted to put the past behind them, who wanted to build a better future for their people. They talked about trade, about culture, about international relations, about the dangers of nuclear war. They drank tea together, ate meals together, walked through the gardens of the Forbidden City, talking quietly, sharing their hopes and fears for the future. And in those conversations, Henry showed his true self. Not a powerful politician, but a thoughtful, empathetic man who genuinely wanted to understand the other side. He did not lecture Premier Zhu. He listened. He did not demand concessions. He sought compromise. He did not talk down to the Chinese leaders. He treated them with the respect they deserved. And in doing so, he laid the groundwork for a friendship that would last for decades. That I can almost feel it, my dear. The tension, the hope, the quiet courage of that moment. Henry sat across from Premier Zhu and Lai, a man who had grown up in a different world, who had different beliefs, who had been an enemy of America for decades. But they talked to each other with respect, with kindness, with a willingness to listen. Henry said, "The world is too small for two great powers to be enemies. We may have different beliefs, different ways of life, but we share a common goal: to keep our people safe, to build a peaceful world, to give our children a better future." Premier Zhu nodded and said, "You are right. The past is the past. We must look to the future, to a time when America and China are friends, not enemies." And in 1972, Henry helped arrange for President Nixon to visit China, a trip that shocked the world. The cross-Pacific handshake between President Nixon and Chinese leader Mao Zedong, a handshake that symbolized the end of decades of hostility, a handshake that opened the door between America and China, a door that has stayed open ever since. The trip was a success beyond anyone's wildest dreams. America and China agreed to start talking, to start trading, to start building a friendship. The world watched in amazement, and for a moment, it felt like peace was possible, like the world could change for the better. Henry was hailed as a hero, a peacemaker, a man who had done the impossible. But he never took the credit. He said that the credit belonged to everyone who had worked for peace, to everyone who had been willing to listen, to everyone who had believed that change was possible. And that was the truth of Henry Kissinger. He was never in it for the glory. He was in it for the people, for the children who would not have to grow up in fear, for the families who would not have to be torn apart by war, for the world that could be a little kinder, a little safer, a little more peaceful. Let me tell you a third little story, my dear, about a Chinese farmer named Li, who lived in a small village outside Beijing, a village surrounded by rice fields and fruit orchards. Li was 50 years old, with weathered hands from years of working the land, a kind face, and a heart full of hope. He had never seen an American before, and he had been told all his life that Americans were enemies, that they were cruel, that they wanted to destroy China. He was scared of Americans, scared of what they might do, scared that they would take away his land, his home, his family. When he heard that American leaders were coming to China, he was terrified. He told his wife and children to stay inside, to hide, to not come out until the Americans were gone. But he was also curious about what Americans looked like, curious about what they were like, curious about why they had come to China. One day, he decided to go into Beijing to see for himself. He walked for hours, along dirt roads and busy streets, until he reached the center of the city. There, in a market square, he saw Henry walking through the crowd, talking to the vendors, smiling, asking about their lives, about their families, about their crops. Li was surprised. This American leader was not angry or scary. He was kind, he listened, he cared. He was not wearing a military uniform, not carrying a weapon. He was wearing a simple suit, and he was talking to ordinary people like they were old friends. Lee watched, fascinated, as Henry stopped to taste a piece of fruit from a vendor's cart, as he laughed at a joke a child told him, as he patted an elderly man on the shoulder. This was not the enemy Lee had been told about. This was a man, just like him, a man who cared about his family, a man who wanted to live in peace. Li watched from a distance for a long time, and then, summoning all his courage, he walked up to Henry. He was nervous, his hand shaking, but he said, in broken Chinese, "Hello. I am Lee. I am a farmer. I have never seen an American before." Henry smiled, shook his hand, and said, in simple Chinese, "Hello, Lee. It is nice to meet you. I am Henry. I am here to make friends with China." Henry asked Lee about his farm, about his crops, about his family. He asked Lee what he hoped for the future, and Lee said, "I hope that my children can go to school, that we can have enough food to eat, that there will be no war, that we can live in peace." Henry nodded, and said, "That is what I hope for too, Lee. That is what we all hope for, peace, happiness, a better future for our children." Henry gave Lee a small gift, a pen, with the words peace written on it, and said, "This is a gift for you. A reminder that peace is possible, that we can be friends." Lee took the pen, tears in his eyes, and said, "Thank you. Thank you for showing me that Americans are not enemies. Thank you for giving me hope." After that, Lee's village started selling their vegetables to American companies, and his children were able to go to school, something that had never been possible before. He told his grandchildren, "Once, we thought Americans were our enemies. But Henry Kissinger showed us that we can be friends, that we can learn from each other, that we can build a better future together." That is what diplomacy does, my love. It breaks down walls, it builds bridges, it turns fear into friendship, it turns hatred into love. It shows us that no matter how different we are, no matter where we come from, we are all human beings. We all have hopes and fears. We all want peace and happiness. And Henry Kissinger was the master of that diplomacy, not because he was clever, not because he was powerful, but because he was kind, because he listened, because he saw the humanity in everyone, even those who were different from him. Henry did many great things, my dear. He helped end the war in Vietnam, negotiating a peace agreement in 1973 that brought thousands of American soldiers home to their families, that ended years of bloodshed and suffering. The war in Vietnam had been a terrible, painful war, and many people had lost their lives. Many families had been torn apart. Henry worked tirelessly to negotiate the peace agreement, traveling back and forth between Washington, D.C. and Hanoi, meeting with Vietnamese leaders, listening to their demands, explaining America's position, making compromises, never giving up. There were days when he felt like giving up, days when the negotiations seemed hopeless, days when he was criticized by both sides, by Americans who thought he was giving too much, by Vietnamese who thought he was not giving enough. But he kept going, because he knew that every day the war continued, more people died, more families were torn apart. When the peace agreement was signed, the world breathed a sigh of relief. American soldiers came home, reunited with their families. and the people of Vietnam were able to start rebuilding their country. Henry was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973 for his efforts to end the Vietnam War, and while he was humble about the award, saying that it belonged to everyone who had worked for peace, it was a testament to his courage, his wisdom, his dedication to peace. But Henry did not stop there. He worked with the Soviet Union to sign the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 1972, an agreement that stopped the two countries from building more nuclear weapons, that reduced the risk of a nuclear war, that kept the world safer. He traveled to the Middle East, going from country to country, talking to leaders, helping to end a war between Israel and its neighbors in 1973, a war that had threatened to escalate into a larger conflict. He was a shuttle diplomat, flying from one capital to another, Tel Aviv to Cairo, to Damascus, to Beirut, always looking for a way to bring peace, always working to resolve conflicts, always fighting for the people who were caught in the crossfire. He would often stay up all night, negotiating, talking, listening, never getting tired, never giving up. He knew that the lives of millions of people depended on his work, and he took that responsibility seriously. And through it all, he remained true to himself, kind, humble, empathetic, a man who never let power change him. But remember, my dear, change is never easy. There were people who disagreed with Henry, who said he was too soft, who wanted him to fight instead of talk, who criticized him for working with America's enemies. After he helped end the war in Vietnam, some people were angry, saying the peace was not perfect, saying that America had lost the war. When he opened relations with China, some people said he was betraying America, saying that he was helping an enemy. When he worked with the Soviet Union, some people said he was being naive, saying that the Soviet Union could not be trusted. But Henry never gave up, because he knew that peace is never perfect, it is just better than war. He knew that there would always be critics, always be people who disagreed with him, but he also knew that he was doing the right thing, that he was working to keep the world safe, to protect the lives of ordinary people. He said, "The task of diplomacy is to make sure that the worst does not happen," and that is what he did. He did not always get it right, no one does, but he always tried, always worked his hardest, always put peace first. He once said, "I have made mistakes, but I have never made a mistake that I did not learn from." And that is the mark of a great leader, someone who is willing to admit their mistakes, who is willing to learn from them, who is willing to keep trying even when things are hard. Henry was not perfect, my dear. He had flaws, he had regrets, he made decisions that were controversial. But he was human, and that is what made him so relatable, so inspiring. He was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he never let it harden his heart. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, but he never lost faith in the best. Henry's work changed the world, my dear. His cross-Pacific handshake between America and China led to decades of friendship and trade, helping both countries grow and prosper. American companies started doing business in China, creating jobs for people in both countries. Chinese students came to America to study, bringing their culture and their ideas, and American students went to China, learning about Chinese culture and history. The two countries worked together on issues like climate change, global health, and international security, showing the world that even former enemies can become friends. His peace agreement in Vietnam brought an end to a terrible war, saving countless lives, allowing the people of Vietnam to start rebuilding their country, to heal the wounds of war. His work with the Soviet Union helped prevent a nuclear war, keeping the world safe for you and me, for our children, for future generations. Even after he left office in 1977, he never stopped working. He started a consulting company, Kissinger Associates, where he advised presidents and world leaders on international relations. He wrote more books, including Diplomacy, on China, and World Order, books that are still read by students, diplomats, and leaders around the world, books that teach people about the importance of diplomacy, about the need for peace, about the power of words. He traveled the world, visiting countries, meeting with leaders, always fighting for peace, always working to make the world a better place. He was a tireless worker, a man who never slowed down, even as he got older. And in his later years, he became even more reflective, more focused on the legacy he would leave behind. He would often say, "I do not care about being remembered for my achievements. I care about being remembered as someone who tried to make the world a safer, kinder place." He wrote a book called On China, published in 2011, where he talked about his love for China, his experiences in China, his hope for the future of US-China relations. He wrote about the importance of friendship between the two countries, about the need to work together to solve the world's problems. He visited China more than 100 times, even when he was 100 years old, still working to keep the friendship between the two countries strong, still talking to Chinese leaders, still sharing his wisdom and his hope for peace. He once said, "I have spent half my life working on US-China relations," and those words were true. He cared deeply about the people of both countries, about the future of the world, about the legacy he would leave behind. He believed that US-China relations were the most important relationship in the world, that the two countries had a responsibility to work together to build a peaceful, prosperous future for all. In his later years, even as his health began to fail, he continued to speak out about the importance of peace, about the need for diplomacy, about the dangers of war. He would give speeches, write articles, meet with leaders, always trying to make a difference, always fighting for what he believed in. And through it all, he remained humble, kind, and grateful. Grateful for the second chance America had given him, grateful for the opportunity to serve, grateful for the people who had supported him along the way. Remember, my dear, Henry Kissinger was not perfect. No one is. He made mistakes, he had flaws, he had critics. But he had a gift for seeing the good in people, a gift for talking to those who disagreed with him, a gift for finding peace in the middle of conflict. He was a refugee, a soldier, a professor, a diplomat, but most of all, he was a man who believed that one person can make a difference. He believed that words are more powerful than weapons, that kindness is more strength than anger, that peace is worth fighting for. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, the cruelty of the Nazis, the horror of war, the pain of suffering, but he had also seen the best of humanity, kindness, compassion, courage, hope. And he chose to focus on the best, to work for the best, to believe in the best. He was a man who never lost his curiosity, never lost his passion, never lost his faith in the power of peace. He once said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." And that is exactly what he did. He fell, he made mistakes, he faced criticism, but he always rose again, always kept going, always fought for peace. He was a man of contradictions, tough yet gentle, realistic yet hopeful, powerful yet humble. And that is what made him so extraordinary. He was human, through and through, and he used his humanity to change the world. What does this mean? For you, my sweet? It means that you have the power to make a difference too. You do not have to be a diplomat or a president to spread kindness, to listen to others, to stand up for peace. You do not have to be famous or powerful to make the world a better place. Every time you are kind to someone who is different from you, every time you listen instead of shout, every time you choose love over fear, every time you help someone who is struggling, you are following in Henry's footsteps. You are helping to build a better world, just like he did. You are showing the world that kindness matters, that compassion matters, that peace matters. Maybe you will help a friend who is sad, or stand up for someone who is being bullied, or volunteer to help people in need. Maybe you will learn about different cultures, about different people, and share that knowledge with others. Maybe you will dream of a world where there is no war, no hate, no suffering, and work to make that dream come true. Whatever you do, remember that you have the power to change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. Henry started as a scared little boy, but he grew up to change the world. You can too, my dear. You are brave, you are smart, you are kind, and you have a heart full of hope. Never forget that. And remember, just like Henry, you do not have to be perfect. You just have to try, to be kind, to listen, to hope. That is enough. Remember, my dear, freedom is a gift, but peace is a choice. Henry chose peace, again and again, even when it was hard. He chose to talk instead of fight, to understand instead of judge, to hope instead of despair. He chose to see the good in people, even when they did not show it. He chose to work with his enemies to find common ground, to build bridges instead of walls. And that is his legacy, the legacy of a man who used his wisdom and his heart to make the world a safer, kinder place. His legacy is not just in the treaties he signed, not just in the wars he ended, not just in the friendships he built between nations. His legacy is in the lives he touched, in the people he inspired, in the hope he gave to the world. His legacy is in you, in me, in all of us who choose peace, who choose kindness, who choose to make a difference. He once said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And his dream was a world of peace, a world where all people can live in freedom and safety, a world where kindness and compassion are the most powerful forces. That dream lives on in you, my dear, and it is up to you to keep it alive. Just like Henry, you have the power to be a force for good, to be a bridge between people, to be a guardian of peace. Now, my beloved, let us come back to this quiet night. The moon is still shining, casting warm, silvery light across your bed, and the leaves are still rustling outside your window, a soft, soothing sound that lulls you to sleep. The distant hoot of the owl is gone, and the only sound is the steady, reassuring rhythm of your own breath, in and out, slow and calm. Henry Kissinger's story is a story of courage, of kindness, of hope, a story that reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is light, even in the most divided world, there is a way to come together. It is a story that reminds us that one person can make a difference, that words are more powerful than weapons, that peace is worth fighting for. As you lie here, warm and safe, remember that you are loved, that you are safe, that you have the power to change the world. I am right here with you, my sweet, holding your hand, watching over you, loving you. You are not alone. The world is a better place because you are in it. And just like Henry, you can leave your own legacy, one of kindness, one of hope, one of peace. Close your eyes, my dear, and let the warmth of this night wrap around you like a cozy blanket. Let go of all your worries, all your fears, all your stress. They are not important right now. Right now, all that matters is that you are safe, that you are loved, that you can rest. Dream of a world where nations talk instead of fight, where people love instead of hate, where every child feels safe and loved, where every person has the chance to live a happy, peaceful life. Dream of a world where kindness is the norm, where compassion is the rule, where peace is the reality. Henry's dream was a world of peace, and that dream lives on in you, in me, in all of us. As you drift off to sleep, let the soft rustle of the leaves be your lullaby. Let the gentle glow of the moon cradle you, and let the memory of Henry's kindness wrap around you like a hug. He may be gone, but his light remains, bright, warm, and unwavering, guiding us all to be kinder, braver, and more hopeful. You are not alone in this night, my sweet. I am here, holding you close, and Henry's spirit is here too, a quiet reminder that even the smallest acts of goodness can change the world. Breathe in slowly, breathe out softly, and let sleep take you. Sleep well, my beloved. Tomorrow, you will wake up with a heart full of hope, ready to spread kindness just like Henry did. And when you need a reminder, just close your eyes and remember, peace is a choice, kindness is a strength, and you have the power to make a difference. Sleep tight, my dear. I love you, now and always.